Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel and welcome back to another Sims 4 speedrunning video, or welcome to the channel if you are new here. So in today's video I'm going to be building in the world of Forgotten Hollow, which is the world that we got from the game pack The Sims 4 Vampires, and I'm going to be building a big vampire family home. So this house ends up having 2 actual bedrooms and then 2.5 bathrooms, and it's built on a 30 by 30 lot. Now this week I thought it was around that time that I sat down and built something in the world of Forgotten Hollow, because must admit, the name for this world is quite certain. I do actually quite often forget about it, but the world itself is really small. There's like 5 lots I think in total, and so when it comes around to building here, you are quite limited with your lot choices. But as it is October, and as recently I've been doing a lot of like October related builds, I thought I'd sit down and basically just build a vampire family home, and that is exactly what I did. Now I do feel like I need to give you a slight disclaimer for this house, because the actual house build itself, I'm so in love with. Like, I'm just so happy with the way the inside of this house came together. It's very like dark and vampire-y on the inside, but then I still tried to make it seem like it was something that I would build, like without it being too vampire and too gothic, if that makes any sense. But the actual house itself I absolutely love. But one thing that I think makes this house so special for me is the storyline that I've created to go along with it, and the Sims that are going to be living here in my save file, because I did decide to build this house in my save. And basically the past week where I've been building this house, I've just been thinking about the storyline for the Sims and kind of like adding little bits and bobs here and there to it, and I'm really excited to actually finally sit down and basically just talk my mind for the past week of basically what I've been thinking. And yeah, I'm just so happy with both the build and then also the storyline for the Sims that can be living here. And so yeah, I really hope you guys like it. But getting on and actually talking a little bit more about the build itself. So like I already mentioned, this house ends up having 2 actual bedrooms and 2.5 bathrooms. I wasn't saying actual as in like there's actually a bedroom in this house. I'm saying actual because although there is 2 separate bedrooms that both have a double bed and like both like fully fleshed out bedrooms in this house, you can actually sleep another 5 to 7 Sims outside of them bedrooms, because basically this house has got a prison in the basement. I'm gonna just cut this long story short. There's a prison in the basement, and there is also a vampire lair. So the way that I built this house, you kind of like walk in, you've got all like the normal bits and bobs on the first level. You've got this quite grand staircase, which you can see that I'm doing over here. But there is a basement, a secret basement, may I add. And the way that it's a secret, I'm really happy, because I don't think I've ever been able to make a secret basement so secret before. You'll see what I mean. I use a secret door that looks like a bookcase, but I tried to make it look like it was a bookcase wall and it was not like a random door just plonked on the wall, if that makes any sense. But you go through this hidden bookcase door and you go into this first initial basement, which is kind of like this vampire lair, and in there is loads of different statues, there is loads of different like coffins, there is like the pipe organ, like all the vampire bits and bobs. But then there is also a second basement which is below this like vampire lair, which is, yeah, pretty much a prison in this house. Which I'm very much aware that this sounds absolutely morbid. Like, I know I can hear myself, but if you've ever played with vampires, I'm pretty sure you've probably done something like this before in the past, where you see a random townie walking along the streets. It might be like Bob or Eliza Pancakes or something, and with your vampire you've managed to basically compel them to never leave your side or just do whatever you fancy. And I like that kind of like gameplay for like a really powerful, kind of like mean vampire in some sort of way. And so I find that whenever I do vampire builds, I more so often than not always have a basement, and it's always got some sort of like a prison holding situation in basically the floor. But I purposely placed down the basement on the lowest level, like the deepest part of the actual basement itself, because like I said, you go through these hidden bookcase doors, you can just see that I just placed some. Originally I placed down 3, but then when it actually came around to decorating the inside of this house, I did decide to change it up. So then there is 2 bookcase doors, and then in between it is a fireplace. That way it looks legit, like it actually looks like a fireplace, and it's not so obvious that it's a hidden door. But you go through these doors and you get into this first initial vampire lair. There is like loads of different like hallways with statues and stuff. Like, you don't walk in straight into the vampire lair, because I feel like for gameplay that's not the most exciting. I wanted it to be quite tucked away. But then in the actual prison, I purposely put on the deepest part of the basement, because I'm thinking noise. Right, this sounds really bad, but I'm thinking if your Sims have Sims in the basement and they may or may not want to be there, it's probably best that they're quite tucked under the ground, just for like noise purposes for other Sims that are like walking along the streets. basically the prison is in the deepest part of the basement, is what I'm trying to say. And I just thought it was really fun for like gameplay and storyline purposes. And so yeah, there is both a vampire lair, which has 2 coffins in, and then also a prison which can sleep, I believe, up to 5 Sims. I placed down like a single bed in each cell, like a prison toilet. Those are cracks and spider webs onto the wall. And one thing actually that I did, which I was so happy about, you know, the basement treasures kit. We've basically got these like decals that you can put onto the floor, and it looks like scuffs and marks and stuff. I went to town with them in this build, because in the actual basement, like leading to the doors to each of the individual cells, I basically went in and got these floor decals and made it look like someone had dragged something into the cells itself. I just thought it was like a fun little extra thing for gameplay. But yeah, I had a lot of fun just decorating this house and doing all the little like smaller details to it, and I'm just so happy with this house, like I said. And then also the storyline. Now, the reason why I wanted to give a little bit of a disclaimer to this house and the storyline is because the storyline is quite in-depth. I think this was probably one of my most in-depth storylines that I've done in a really long time. So I just basically recommend that you go and get yourself a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or just something, because I had a lot of fun just thinking about this storyline and all the different like smaller details that go into it, and all the different object placements that I can place down in the house to kind of tie into the storyline. So starting off the actual storyline process, the household that I'm building this house for is actually a pre-existing family in the world of Forgotten Hollow, and it is the Batuu family. Now, if you've ever visited the world of Forgotten Hollow, I can almost guarantee that at one point in time you've probably run into these Sims. If you haven't, the household consists of 2 Sims. There is Lilith and Caleb Batuu, and basically they're brother and sister, and they live together in this house. I'm actually building on their original lot. I didn't want to move them. I felt it was quite nice to keep them on their original lot. I try and do that sometimes in my save file, but sometimes I don't. But in this case, I just wanted to keep them where they have, in my head, been for like hundreds, decades of years. But basically, the original description that we're given for this household when you enter a brand new save file, I've taken with not even a pinch of salt. I've basically just gone my own route, and I've just given them a bit of a different storyline up to the one that they're originally given. Now, originally, their household description basically says that the siblings moved to Forgotten Hollow not too long ago. Like, it says something like a couple of years ago or a few years back or something, basically implying that they're not originally from here, which I will actually get into that in a second. But they basically moved to Forgotten Hollow not too long ago, and basically have been trying to make this world their home. And the only thing that is really apparent in the household description, which I've kind of taken a little bit from for my own personal storyline, is they're not on the best terms with Vlad. If you're not aware who Vlad is basically, in my eyes, this big scary vampire that lives at the top of the hill. It's quite a angry, lonely man, and he's meant to be this like really like notoriously evil vampire who's really good at what he does, and you know, he's just the ultimate kind of skilled vampire. And basically the siblings don't get along with him because their household description states that they've got different tastes, like culinary, not cutlery, that's what you eat your dinner with. Basically, the household description states that the Batuu siblings, both Lilith and Caleb, don't tend to drink like human blood. They drink from them little like plasma pack things, if you're familiar. Because if your Sim's a vampire, they don't have to drink from other Sims. They can actually just eat either plasma fruit, or there's these kind of like Capri Sun looking packs that you can buy for a vampire, and it's basically just blood within them, but it looks like a Capri Sun, but it's not. Vampires can drink from it and they're alright. But basically, it's implied in the household description that these Sims, they don't drink from other Sims, they just eat plasma fruit and they drink from these little plasma packs, and they're meant to be some sort of a good vampire. Vlad basically don't like it because he's this big evil man at the end of the hill, and he's all about a proper traditional vampire that drinks from other Sims, and basically because of that they don't get along. Now, I've basically taken this storyline and almost just chucked it out of the window, because I just feel like for these Sims, for these siblings, there is so much more fun that we can have with a storyline for them. And ever since the vampire game pack came out, which the vampire game pack came out donkeys years ago, I think it came out like 5-ish years ago. Ever since it's come out, I've always had my own interpretation of these siblings, and I basically created this storyline for them in my save file around my original kind of like idea of them and how I've always seen them. I do kind of like the idea that maybe Vlad and Lilith, the sister in particular, don't get along, but that's more so over kind of like a power issue, which I will get on into and I'll speak more about that. But I was more so thinking that in total, they're not like enemies or something, but Vlad is maybe a little bit worried that Lilith might overtake him and become the best vampire in the world of Forgotten Hollow, because there's only 2 families originally in this world, but I have already created another family that's going to live here in my save file. They live just across the road, but I basically had this idea that Lilith wants to become this really big, powerful vampire. She wants to be the best of the best. She wants to overtake Vlad, and he just doesn't really like that idea, because he wants to be basically the big bad wolf in the world of Forgotten Hollow. But I'll speak more about Lilith's storyline individually in a little while. I do just kind of want to start off with talking about a little bit of lore with this family that was actually surprisingly added, I think like last year or something, with the Werewolf game pack. Now, I only recently found out about this tiny little bit of lore myself, and once I heard about it, I just needed to implement it into the storyline some way, just because it gives it a little bit more flavour, if you want to put it that way. It makes this storyline a little bit more interesting, and it then connects different families from different worlds, and that's something that I want to do with my save file anyway. Like I want to have families spread out in all these different individual worlds. Like you might have siblings or sisters or something living in the world of Brenton Bay, and you might live in, I don't know, Forgotten Hollow, for example. I love this little bit of lore, but basically the tiny bit of lore that was added last year is Lilith and Caleb have a supposed cousin who is a werewolf who lives in the world of Moonwood Mill. So their cousin's name is Lily Zoo. I really hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm really sorry if I pronounce that incorrectly, but she is a werewolf and she lives in the world of Moonwood Mill, along with another 2 household members, who is Christopher and Jacob. And basically she has a little bit of a backstory tied to like her household bio, and I kind of wanted to connect it to the Batuu family, because basically if you go through some series of dialogue with Lily herself, by the way, it's really confusing, because we have Lily the werewolf, who's the cousin, and then we have Lilith the vampire, who's the sister in this household. So I think I might refer to her as Lily the werewolf, because I just feel like it'd be easier for both me and for you. But basically, Lily the werewolf has supposedly moved in with these other werewolves, and they're kind of showing her the ropes. But although I love this detail of they're meant to be these distant family members from different worlds and different occults and stuff, it did kind of throw off my original storyline in my head for the Batuu family, because to me, I've always envisioned that Lilith and Caleb have come from this really powerful family of vampires, like decades old. They've got great-great-great-grandparents, and they were vampires, and they're this really rich, powerful family. But then to have a cousin who's a werewolf kind of throws it off a little bit, because well, how comes you've got a tail and I've got fangs? Like, it didn't really make any sense to me. And so I basically decided to add a little bit of detail to the cousin storyline and just make it make sense to me. So I was thinking, originally Lily the werewolf wasn't a werewolf. Like, Lily the werewolf was not always a werewolf. She at one point in time was in fact a normal vampire. I say normal vampire. She was in fact at one point in time, she was a vampire like her cousins Lilith and Caleb. And I was thinking, well, how come she's now a werewolf? What happened? Like, how come she had to move in with this household and they've had to show her the ropes to how to actually be a werewolf? Something must have happened. And so I was thinking, well, what about if Lily the werewolf used to be a vampire herself, and she maybe used to even live with her cousins? I'm pretty sure it says that somewhere in the dialogue that she actually grew up with Lilith and Caleb, and they were really close, and she had like a really good relationship with her cousins, which, by the way, apparently they're meant to be connected on their mother's side. But either way, I was thinking, well, what about if Lily the werewolf at one point in time was a vampire, but just so happened to have a werewolf partner, like she was in love with someone that was basically the enemy occult. Which, I don't know if anyone else does this, but automatically in my head, if I've got a vampire and they run into a werewolf, even if they have like the best compatibility, instantly enemies. I don't know what it is. In my head, I always just think that werewolves and vampires, they just do not get along. And so for the idea that I had for Lily the werewolf, I was thinking when she was younger, maybe she fell in love with a werewolf, and basically her family gave her an ultimatum of, well, that is kind of like the enemy. You can either break up with them or just, disown your family and go and be a werewolf. And I imagine that she probably chose the werewolf boyfriend, and since then her partner has maybe possibly passed away or something, and then she needed to be taught the ropes, and then that's why she had to move in with Christopher and Jacob, them other werewolves, and maybe that's why they were kind of like teaching her over time. Maybe her partner like passed away not too long after she decided to abandon her family, which, if you think about it, actually really peak from her, but that was basically the idea that I had for this cousin, that they've got in another world, like they've got this werewolf cousin, but she never used to be a werewolf. She just decided to make some life decisions and basically switch over to the enemy's side. Tell you what, I do really love when the Sims team decide to add these little tiny increments of lore every so often, like here and there. They do it in dribs and drabs, don't get me wrong, it's not, they don't add it that often, but I love the fact that they gave us this kind of like idea, because to me personally, I would have never thought of this like small distant storyline idea that kind of connects this one family to another family. And to me, yeah, it just makes this storyline for the Batuu family just so much more interesting. I also imagine, by the way, that since when you go into a brand new save file, this werewolf cousin has absolutely no idea who her vampire cousins are, which not really surprised with the Sims team, because they often do that. But I have this idea that they probably don't even like each other. They're kind of like, she disowned her family, and so the cousins have kind of disowned her. She's not going to be popping around for tea, basically. But yeah, that was kind of like the storyline that I imagine for Lily, the werewolf cousin. But actually moving on and talking about the storyline for the household members themselves, because that was only like the stepping stones for the actual family. But talking about Caleb, the brother in particular. Now, when you go into a brand new save file, I believe that both siblings, both brother and sister, are the exact same age, and I don't know if anyone else is going to be on the same wavelength as me, but I've always seen Caleb, the brother, to be the little brother. He just gives me little brother energy. I don't know if anyone else is the same, but I've always had this picture in my mind of him being a bit of a mischievous, kind of rebellious brother who kind of does what he wants and doesn't really think about his actions and doesn't really think about who it's going to hurt. That's the idea that I've always had for Caleb. Now, when you go into a brand new save file, his original traits are foodie, ambitious and materialistic, and his original aspiration is to be a good vampire, which, like I've already said, this original like household description, the original Sims and their traits and their individual storylines, I've basically decided to abandon and just go my own route, because to me personally, ever since we've had the Vampires game pack, I've always seen Caleb to be this like really notorious serial romantic, a bit of a womanizer, a bit of a Don Lothario, if you get my drift, you know, a little bit of someone that likes to be around a lot of different Sims at a lot of different given points in time. I think it's from the original Vampires trailer for like the actual game pack itself. I'm pretty sure that was kind of like put into the trailer of this Sim being a bit of like a serial romantic, and he's got this sort of like superpower where he can make anyone fall in love with him. That's always how I've seen Caleb, and I was so disappointed when I actually got my hands on the pack for the first time all them years ago, and that wasn't really carried on through, like that wasn't really a thing. To be honest, I still, even though it's not carried over into the actual game itself, even just from watching the trailer all them years ago, even to this day, I will still look at Caleb and I will still think that he's basically a vampire version of Don Lothario. And so yeah, for my save file, I basically just wanted to give him that impression that we was originally given like 5-6 years ago from the original Vampires trailer, and just basically make him into a bit of a heartbreaker. I'm going to replace his foodie trait with the romantic trait, and then I think I'm going to replace his aspiration to be, you know, the serial romantic one, basically where Sim wants to have loads of different like partners. I think that will be quite suiting for him, and so yeah, that is what I've decided to do for Caleb in particular. I was also thinking of some sort of like a little bit of a backstory for him, because I was thinking there's probably some reasoning to why he is the way he is. Like, why is he such a notorious serial romantic? Like, why does he always seem to want to be around all these different Sims at all these different given points in time? And I was thinking that maybe he was at one point in a serious relationship, but the other Sim disappeared. Must admit, part of this storyline came from, I don't know if you've seen The Vampire Diaries, absolutely banging series, love The Vampire Diaries, but if you've ever seen The Vampire Diaries, you might be familiar with Damien's storyline. I was thinking something along the lines of that, you know, he had someone at one point in time, and he made it his mission to try and find his basically long lost love, and they just completely just disappeared off the face of the earth. And I feel like ever since then, he's been a bit cold-hearted, and that is the way, or that is the reason why he is the way he is, because I do seem to be this really mischievous, quite rebellious little brother who doesn't really think about their actions. You know, they might do something, they might accidentally do something to a normal Sim, and Lilith kind of has to pick up the pieces because he's a little bit reckless like that. But I feel like the reasoning for him to be that way is because maybe at one point in time he did have this partner that he loved dearly, but they just kind of packed up and left, or they might have disappeared or something. Maybe they were taken by like a werewolf, or I don't even know. But I love this idea, and so in the basement in the vampire lair, I pop a little picture of the sim that I imagine to be his long lost love that has kind of like disappeared above his coffin. And I was thinking maybe he looks at that every single time he gets into the coffin and thinks that maybe one day he's going to be able to find her again. But in the meantime, he is just going around the world causing chaos for, most importantly, his sister, because I imagine that his sister always has to deal with the mess that he creates. But yeah, that is pretty much Caleb's individual story. Quickly interrupting my storytelling process just to talk about the lounge room that I'm quickly doing. I just wanted to speak about the hidden door because they are in this room. It's on the other side where the fireplace is. You might see there is 2 what seems to be bookcases. That is actually the hidden door that I was speaking about. So it's very secret. You don't actually feel like that is going to be a door, but yeah, them little bookcase doors either side the fireplace in this room is actually a secret door into multiple levels of a basement. But I did just want to mention that here because I've got still a little bit left of the storyline to tell you about, but I just wanted to point out where them hidden doors were. But moving on and actually talking about the storyline for the sister of his household, which is Lilith. So Lilith's storyline, bless her, is a little bit sadder in comparison to her brothers, in a sense of she also at one point in time did have a partner that she dreamt of marrying and, you know, spending the rest of her vampire life together with them. But unfortunately, her vampire partner passed away in the process of becoming a vampire. So basically, when you go into a brand new save file, she has the original traits of being outgoing, creative and active, and she originally has the aspiration to have a successful vampire family. You know them aspirations for like the family category where your Sims want to have loads of kids and have them be really super smart and successful and get like really high up in their careers. Basically, Lilith's original aspiration in life was to have that, but just the vampire version, and I decided to take that and kind of implement it into her storyline, and I just really like her storyline, even though it is quite sad. So I was personally picturing that at one point in time, she herself also did have a partner, but this partner wasn't a vampire, they wasn't a werewolf, they were just like a normal everyday Sim, just like a casual, like someone that you might see working like the business centre, or, you know, just like an average everyday Joe kind of guy. I was thinking that she met this Sim and she instantly fell in love with them, like just instantly connected, had the exact same traits, the exact same like values, even though she is a vampire and they would have been a human Sim. But I imagine that they just got along like clockwork, like they were the perfect match for each other. And she originally had this aspiration to have this vampire family, and after a lot of discussions, her and her partner decided that it would just be best if she turned him into a vampire, and so that is pretty much what she attempted to do. Now, because I want this supposed partner to be in the family tree, I think I might make it so maybe Lilith and this ex-partner of hers were potentially engaged, or maybe they were just about to get married when they sadly passed away, because I want to be able to have this storyline kind of shown throughout the relationships in the family tree within my save file, and it just feels weird if I don't have them in the family tree. And so I feel like a good way around that is maybe if she was engaged to this said person, and maybe like the finishing touch that they needed to do just before they got married, maybe like it's a requirement if you want to marry into vampires, is you've got to be turned into one. And so in the process of her trying to turn her partner into a vampire, they sadly passed away. Whether that was because they reacted badly to the blood that they were given, or whether that was because maybe like a werewolf had some sort of vendetta against Lilith and didn't want her to have his happy ending, and so they tried to basically tarnish that, and maybe it did something to her partner, and basically he is not around anymore, which is really sad. Now I can just picture this having such a obvious negative effect on Lilith. Like she was picturing marrying the love of her life, she was going to settle down, she was going to have the successful vampire family, and she was going to be happy, and unfortunately they passed away, which is really sad. But I feel like it ties into her storyline really nicely, because I was thinking, well, instead of her having the family vampire aspiration, I'm going to make it so her now new aspiration is to be a master vampire. Basically, like I was saying, wants to overtake Vlad, she wants to become the best, and she just wants to be the best kind of vampire that she can be. I imagine that nowadays she's so like heartless, so she's so cut off from forming any sort of like new relationships because she's worried about getting hurt, and so she literally just spends the majority of her days just reading and studying and just practicing all of her like vampire skills and magic and stuff, and She just wants to become the best, and is a little bit of an unsociable person nowadays, because I imagine she's just so cut off from it. But I just feel like this suits her so perfectly. And again, I don't know if anyone else has got this interpretation of her, but whenever my Sims would see Caleb and maybe go over to their original household, I always have this idea in my head that my Sims is a little bit intimidated by like the big older sister that's a little bit scary, you know, she's a little bit intimidating because I feel like she's so serious, and whenever Caleb, her brother, brings anyone into the house, she's just like a little bit cold-hearted, she's a little bit like standoffish. That is just kind of like the idea that I have for her. But yeah, that was pretty much the storyline for this whole entire household. There is also going to be a cat in the household, which I'm going to add, which the reasoning for a cat is I feel like a vampire to have a cat is quite suiting, but then also there's a kitchen in this house, which is actually kind of pointless if you're a vampire. But I don't know if you noticed, in the kitchen I placed down some like packets of cat food and then cat bowls, basically wanting to make the kitchen actually usable in this house, because kitchens in vampire houses, their food's walking outside in the streets, like they don't actually need a fridge or an oven or anything. And so I did decide that I'm going to add a cat. But yeah, that was pretty much the storyline for this household. I'm just so in love with this storyline, and I just think it's so much fun to play around with, and I'm so happy the way that I decorated their house, because I try to show this kind of storyline in increments here and there. I'm so sorry that I spoke over a lot of the furnishing for this house because I was talking about the storyline. Like I said, this storyline was in depth, and this has been in my head all week, and I've just been excited to talk about it because just over the course of the past couple of days, I've just been adding to it every little like bit here and there and just making it so it all ties together, and it's just a nice mushed in storyline, and I was really excited, and it was quite long, so I'm pretty sorry that I spoke over a large portion of the furnishing of this house. But I mean, as you would have seen, I've done pretty much the whole main floor, like the ground level on the upstairs. I did the quite grand entrance hallway with like the double staircase. We then did the kitchen, we then did the dining room, and then we also did the lounge room. Currently, I'm doing the coffin room, or like the first tier of the basement, which is pretty much like a vampire lair, like a little secret vampire hideout. Now, like I said, the way that you actually get down here is you have to go through the lounge room on like the main ground level of this house, and then there is a series of, there is 4 bookcases in total. There's basically a fireplace, and then above the fireplace is a painting, but either side of the actual fireplace there is 2 sets of bookcase doors. It looks like a normal bookcase, like the way that I did it, I feel like you would think that it just looks like a normal bookcase because they're all mushed together, but no, your Sims can actually walk through them, and they come down into this first level, which, yeah, like I said, is like this little hidden vampire lair basement hideout kind of thing. So when you actually initially walk down, you kind of have to go through a different of series of doors to actually get into the main lair itself. I didn't want your Sims to walk down into the basement and then automatically be met with all like these coffins and statues and all these ornaments and stuff. Like, I wanted it to feel like it was a bit more grand than that, and so I created some archways, and then I popped down some statues in between them. I placed down some like ivy behind the statues to make it feel like old and overgrown and stuff, and then you actually walk in to the initial like lounge room, if you want to put it that way. Basically, you walk in and you kind of got like this seating area, which ends up having like a pipe organ. We also have a bookcase, we also have some like sofas and seating area, but then either side there's kind of like a left wing and a right wing. If you go to the left wing, you have the coffin space for who I imagine to be Lilith. You can see that I just popped a painting of, it looks to be a Sim and a dog. I imagine that was her long lost lover that sadly passed away in the process of becoming a vampire. And I don't know if you would have noticed, but when I was clutching up the side table that's behind her coffin, I placed down some things that kind of resemble her storyline of having this long lost lover that turned into a vampire but then passed away. I basically popped down like a little vampire tombstone thing onto her side table. I was thinking that was her past partner, and in the process of them turning into a vampire, yeah, like I said, they passed away, and so she displays their urn on her side table behind her coffin, and then the painting I imagine is him. But then on the other side I have Caleb's kind of like little coffin space. In there again I placed down a painting behind his little side table. That painting looks a little bit newer because I was thinking that Lilith's long lost love, this was decades ago, like this was hundreds of years old. So the painting kind of resembles that, because the painting of the sim and the dog looks a little bit older, like it looks like it's got like some sort of filter on it, if you want to put it that way. But I imagine that was probably hundreds of years ago, whereas Caleb's, more so like Long Lost Lover, was a little bit more recent, and so that painting actually has colour. And also the sim in that painting also looks like a vampire. I say that it's only because the sim in the painting above Caleb's like little coffin space, they're wearing a dress which we actually got from the Vampires game pack, even though I'm pretty sure the painting itself is from the Cats and Dogs expansion pack. The sim in the painting is wearing a dress that we got from the Vampires game pack. But yeah, I imagine that was Caleb's Long Last Lover. And then in between it, like I said, it's kind of like a communal vampire lounge space. So we have like the pipe organ. I knew where I was doing a vampire build, I needed to include that somewhere, and so ends up being in the basement. I then also placed down like a bookcase, and then yeah, another seating area, and then also a really expensive painting above the long like sofa that I placed down. I'm pretty sure the painting that I placed down behind that sofa is like one of the most expensive ones in the game. Maybe they found it like decades ago, and it's like one of the most valuable things in the house, and so they proudly display it in their little vampire lair thing. But anyway, moving on, as you can see, I've now moved over into the second level of the basement. So this is deep down into the basement, and this is going to be where the prison is. So as you can see over here, I went to town with placing down them little like floor decal things that I was talking about from the basement treasures kit. I basically got these little like floor decals. They're under the rug category, which, I mean, I understand why they're under the rug category, because it's something that you place down onto the floor for decoration, but by no means I wouldn't recommend using them as a normal rug in like your lounge room or something. But I basically placed them down in like a bit of a pattern. So from the original like basement level where that vampire kind of like hidden basement is, there is a door which leads down into this basement. And I basically started from there, placing down these little like floor decals, kind of like following the route of what Sims and whatever they're dragging, whether it be a person or an object, down into the basement. And then I kind of connected it, and once you come down through the stairs, I then wrapped these like little like floor decals round again, and then I brought them in to the actual prison itself. I then connected them all, going to all the different individual cells, and it just looks, it's a small detail, but honestly it made me so happy. I was having the absolute time of my life doing it, because it's just them little small realistic touches which for me just makes it just so much fun. It just makes me feel like this is so realistic, and like something or someone has been placed down into this basement, and there was a little bit of a struggle in the process of doing so. But you know, I went to town placing down these floor decals, the wall decals. I placed down loads of different like spider webs, loads of different cracks. I placed down like a single candle for like an individual light source in each one of the prison cells. And then, as you would have seen, in the actual cells themselves, I placed down a bed, a toilet, a little sink, a mirror, just some like general basic sim needs. There is no food in there, but if I'm being honest, I feel like if these Sims were trying to keep people in the basement, they probably wouldn't give them a mini fridge and a coffee machine. You can do that if you want to, but I decided not to do that. But yeah, I just finished up that room, and now, as you can see, I've moved on to the upstairs portion, and I'm doing like the upstairs landing. So over here you can kind of see a little bit of the downstairs like initial entrance hallway into the build, which I must admit I was too carried away and I kind of completely spoke over. But you can kind of see on the downstairs portion we end up having like some statues of knights, we end up having this like wraparound rug, we have these big fancy curtains hanging down. And then originally I placed down a chandelier and then I sized it up, but then the fact that I sized up this chandelier that had candles on it, and the candles then didn't size up with the chandelier and they were kind of like weirdly floating, irritated me. So you might have noticed at the start of this like hallway clip, I pretty much decided to switch out the original chandelier that I placed down and then place it down with like a normal one where the candles are where they meant to be, if that makes any sense. But up here I placed down a similar rug to what I did on the downstairs level, also placed down a ton of different statues, I placed down another little seating area. I then had these two like little indents, if you want to put it that way, into the wall, and I didn't know what to do with them, because at this point in time, I feel like I had used the whole entire statue category to this full potential, because in this house, as you might notice, there is so many different statues and so many different ornaments and so many just bits and bobs. Like these Sims, they're really old. They would have acquired a lot of stuff over time. And so when it came round to furnishing the upstairs hallway, and I kind of had like these empty blocks, which originally I was thinking I'll just put some statues in there, make it seem very vampire-y. at that point in time, I didn't want to be too repetitive, and so in the end what I ended up doing is I got these really tall bookcases and then kind of wrapped them around the wall, and then it kind of looks like some sort of like bookcase indent into the wall, if that makes any sense. But either way, as you can see, I've now moved on and I started furnishing one of the first actual bedrooms, which is Lilith's bedroom. Now, I personally don't imagine either of the siblings to actually use their bedrooms to go to sleep in. I personally imagine that they probably both sleep downstairs in the basement, more so Lilith than Caleb, because I imagine that Caleb's probably always got some company with him. But I was thinking I still wanted to fully decorate their bedrooms and basically put their personalities and how I see them into their space. Now, where I see Lilith to eventually become this really grand master vampire, like she is going to be really good at being a vampire, like she knows all the stuff that needs to be known about being the best vampire that she could possible. I wanted to have quite a formal, quite like appropriate bed for that, and so I tried to make some sort of like a custom bed. You can see the way that I did it is I basically got some pillars. The ones that I used I think are from the Get Together expansion pack. I use them ones because there's like a similar wood tone to the bed that I've used, which the actual bed itself is from the Vampires game pack. It felt only suiting to use that bed, but I basically placed down these pillars either side the bed, and then using the tool mod I adjusted the location of the pillars because normally they snap to a certain place, but with the tool mod you can like move them about. So I moved them to kind of like the post of the end of the bed, and then what I did is originally I was going to use these curtains that I've placed around the windows and kind of do some sort of like curtain wrap around quite formal bed, but then in the process of doing that I remembered that we've got these like hanging lights from the high school years expansion pack. They're the ones that are kind of like draped over the bed, perfect for Lilith's room. And so I decided to scrap the original idea of using curtains, place down like these overhead, they're actually meant to be ceiling lights, and try to make it feel somewhat formal and fancy. They come in this really nice like black and white like dotted swatch, and yeah, I just absolutely love the way her bedroom came together. Another thing that I did in her bedroom, which I need to do this in some more builds, I made a custom standing mirror, which you might have seen the way that I did it, but basically what I did is I got this painting which is from the Vampires game pack. Originally it's got like a painting of like Vad or some other sort of like vampire in it, it doesn't really matter, but I placed down this painting and then using the tool mod I rotated it backwards ever so slightly to make it look like it was leaning on the corner of the wall. I then drew a wall, placed down like an individual like mirror that's got like no like frame around it, if you want to put it that way, placed down this mirror onto the wall, deleted the wall, and then again using the tool mod I like move objects this mirror into the painting and made it so it was completely seamless, and it looks like the frame, which originally was a painting, was the frame for a mirror. It 100% works, like it's fully usable. Also, probably a really good point to mention right now, the whole entire house has been play tested and it's 100% usable. You won't run into any problems if you want to download this build and you want to play with it in your game. Like the bookcases, like the hidden bookcases, they work. All the coffins work. The prison cells, if you want to use them, they work. Like everything that I've done in this build works 100%. The only one problem I really ran into was I moved objects, a bookcase in the basement, into the floor, but I wasn't expecting that to work. Your Sims don't grab a bookcase from that one, they will just automatically go to another bookcase. And then also the kitchen bin didn't work, which bins never seem to work nowadays in my builds. I don't know if anyone else is experiencing that, but other than that, everything else in this house, including that little custom mirror, yeah, it works 100%. But as you would have seen, as well as that, I just decorated Lilith's balcony. On her balcony she ends up having a telescope and then also a art easel because she does have the creative trait. And then I just quickly did one of the bathrooms in this house. Like I mentioned, there is 2.5 bathrooms in the house in total. Well, if you're counting the prison toilets, and there's like an extra 5, but I'm not counting them. But there is a powder room downstairs just behind the kitchen. I placed down a litter box in there as well for the cat. But then there is both an ensuite for both of the siblings. Bathrooms and vampires, I feel like they don't need to use them that much because recently I've started playing with a vampire in my own personal gameplay, and I remembered that it was either the hygiene or the bladder. I'm pretty sure it's the bladder. The need is completely disappeared, like you don't even need to use the loo, I'm pretty sure, if you're a vampire, but I still wanted there to be bathrooms in this house regardless. And so yeah, you would have just seen me do one of the bathrooms, and then quickly you just saw me do Caleb's room. In Caleb's room I tried to make it seem like some sort of romantic-ish vampire room, and so there's a lot of red in there, there's a lot of curtains. I basically took the original idea which I had for this room, for having them curtains kind of like draped off some sort of like columns, and I implemented it into his room. I then placed down a stereo in his room. I was thinking when he invites people over, probably wants to like chuck on like the romance station or something, so I placed that down into his room. And then he also has an ensuite, like I said, and then he also has a balcony, which on the balcony I placed down a little seating area. I was thinking that's maybe where he tries to impress people, like sitting down, having a chit chat, watching like the moon rise or go up or whatever. And then there is also a chess table out there. But as you can see, I've now moved on into the last room, which is the home library office space. So there basically needed to be a space in this house for a computer, because to me computers are so vital for gameplay. They offer so many different things, and so this is basically a room that has a load of different bookcases as well as a little computer area. And I've clustered up the bookcases with loads of different like ornaments and fossils and boxes and vases and globes and random bits and bobs. And then I'm just going to go around the room, finish it off, and that is pretty much it. So anyway guys, I'm going to end this voiceover right here. As always, you can download this build via the gallery. My gallery ID is JessicapieYT, or if you just search for the hashtag JessicapieYT or just the hashtag Jessicapie. As always, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and as always, if you do like my content, please do subscribe, and hopefully I will see you in my next Sims 4 speedrunning video. Bye guys.